your life is important, and you are a beacon for someone. You may not realize it, but someone looks up to you, and you're that connection for them. And I think we all have important leadership roles in there, in our lives and who we interact with.
Welcome to the Break Free Podcast. I am your host, David Mancella. Today we have with us an amazing personality. I don't want to do any spoilers, so I just want to do the quick introduction. Jeff King, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. It's great to be here.
Jeff, for the audience, tell me your full name, where do you live, and what do you do for a living?
Okay, yeah. My name is Jeff King. That's not my full name, but I think Jeff King's good enough for now. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver, and the Real Estate Board provides training and advocacy work, but also operates the multiple listing service in the Greater Vancouver area for real estate.
And for people that don't know, Vancouver is the highest priced real estate in the whole country, in Canada.
yeah, it's up there, that's for sure. It's and it's definitely one of the larger markets in the country as well, in terms of size.
How long have you been leading that organization, Jeff?
A little bit over 2 years.
Yeah. And have you seen a big impact and change? Because I don't know, so I live in Ontario, as you know, and our house prices went crazy after COVID, and then now it's a little bit stagnant, but still pretty high. Interest rates are at 7% over here. Like, how are you guys doing down there?
Yeah, it's very, very similar. The Toronto and Vancouver, the Greater Toronto area and the Greater Vancouver area, the prices are pretty close. Vancouver's a little bit higher, but they're within the same realm at the upper stratosphere. The exact same idea as what happened in Eastern Canada when COVID happened. After the initial pause, prices began to climb rapidly, largely due to demand issues and supply issues, and a flood of cash put in by the government into the economy. And the governments of North America and Western Europe, in order to counteract the coronavirus pandemic, resorted to printing money, which was, in hindsight, was the right thing to do, but ended up having an impact as we've seen. In the last 6 months or so, the prices have stabilized. They've not gone down. The interest rates has been a huge factor, and it's a key component in the affordability index, so to speak, of houses, because it's not just the price of the house, it's how much down payment you need, how much are the interest rates, what are the ancillary costs, all those types of things. And those are major factors in Vancouver, as they are throughout much of Canada.
Jeff, I just feel for the newer generations. Like, you and I are set, obviously, but I remember I bought my first house in 1998. And I purchased it for $150,000. It was a 6% interest rate. And I thought that I could never pay it off in my whole life. Right. I was 29 years old. But now I look at my kids, right? Like, one of my kids just got his first house. He's 29. And it's incredible because, my debt, so after my down payment, I did the minimum. I think I had like $140,000 in debt at a 6% interest rate. Now the houses that he was looking at, they were between $750,000 and $1 million. The minimum down payment was like, $70,000, $80,000. And then you have a debt like exponentially higher. Like, how can people afford to get a property nowadays, right?
You're quite right, and it's a major concern, both in terms of the economics of the various regions, but also for the country itself. And we're seeing people living at home longer with their parents, for instance. We're seeing people renting longer. There's been a rise of rentals in Canada. We're not quite at European levels, but it looks like the marketplace is moving that way because of those exact same things. My own experience was not unlike your own. I bought my first house in 1988, and the price seems like it wouldn't even be a down payment now. And the interest rates were, about the same level, and maybe a little bit higher even. But the other factor is that the price of housing has gone up faster than the wages generally.
Mhm.
There's a few exceptions, and this blanket statement, but in a general sense, housing has outstripped investments and wage increases. So as a result, there's greater pressure on different things, and people are relying on the bank of mom and dad to help with the down payment, or grandma and grandpa, or those types of things.
Mm.
That was not necessarily the case a generation or two ago. In the 70s, 80s, and 90s, it didn't really work that way.
It's interesting because if you look at the market compared with Europe, right? We're the Western
Mm-hmm.
world. So North America, Europe, we enjoy freedom, we have
Mm-hmm.
democracy, we have abundance. I remember 15 years ago, I went to Germany with my brother to see some family there. Never been to the country before,
Mm-hmm.
and I noticed that households were multi-family households.
Yeah.
To the place that we went, it was like a raised bungalow with a basement, and in each floor a different family was living. So I was asking around, so what's going on with this? And they said, well, we cannot afford to buy a house. This is 15 years ago, and they said this has been with us for decades. So do
Yeah.
you think that that's the way we're moving in North America towards more the European lifestyle?
I think so. I think there's a combination of things. That's one element, multi-generational, and we are seeing that with grandma and grandpa and mom and dad living with the young couple. But we're also seeing smaller homes begin to reemerge, uh, walkable cities. In the UK, in the United Kingdom, very long mortgage terms. At one point they were talking 100 years. Now there's, which to North American ears is just like unbelievable. But still 50-year mortgages, things like that, to try to lower the monthly payments. Those aren't allowable in Canada under our current structure. But different elements, multi-generational houses, smaller homes, more condensed walkable cities, different things like that are starting to emerge, certainly in the large centers, Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver.
Mhm.
Smaller centers in Canada still are more traditional, I find, and there's more housing affordability and all the rest. But the other nuance that started during COVID, was people moved away from the cities because they could get more house or more property by moving an hour or two outside the major center. But now some companies are moving away from work from home, or the commutes are becoming a feature again. So I think new conversations are starting to happen as well about where people live, and public transit and all those other types of features. Some of these things, through history and all the rest of it, Europe is much more advanced than North America. North America is generally a car-based society,
Mhm.
and Europe's more of a mix. The big centers, you can get by without a car in most major cities in Europe.
Yeah, I think one of the factors is that we live in the second largest landmass in the world as far
Right.
as Canada goes, and we only have 40 million people.
Yep. Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
why you need cars here, because everything is large and expansive, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. If you look at a map or see an image of Earth from space, you think, "Oh my goodness, look how big Canada is," but there's huge swaths of it that are, incredibly remote, and not habitable in the way that we would think of, right? So
Right.
it's a cliche, but we do tend to live along a band along the border, and there's a couple of the different nuances that I always find interesting. 70% of Canadians live south of Seattle,
Wow.
so it's basically southern Ontario and southern Quebec, but is
Mm.
southern of Seattle. That's kind of eye-popping. So there's two or three areas where there's some good concentration in Canada, but there's other parts where they're quite spread out, and to Europeans would be, unbelievable space.
Mm. And the whole pandemic thing and how everything changed. I was doing some research, and our country
Hmm.
accumulated the same debt in 10 years that we have accumulated since the inception of Canada.
Hmm.
So we used to owe $800 billion. Now we owe $1.6 billion, and that increase was only in 10 years.
Yeah, it is unbelievable, and you look at different shocks to the system and the impact they had versus what this was. World War II was a fraction of what COVID and the response to COVID was. And World War II was a sort of a generational item that had a huge impact on the Western world, and was, all hands on deck. Every resource went to a certain event, and we still didn't take that much debt in comparison to what happened over the last decade or so. And there's a bit of a perfect storm too, because I'm sure everyone recalls, in 2008, 2009, we had the Great Recession, as it's called in Canada, the financial crisis. The rest of the world sort of calls it. But there's a lot of government outlay at that time to bail out automakers or to help organize some other large employers. And then coming out of that, we went into a period of almost zero interest rates, and then COVID happened. And then we printed money with zero interest rates for 2.5 years, and guess what happened? Yeah.
And now we're paying 7% interest rate on that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Just I wonder how much the daily debt the Canadian government has to pay on $1.6 trillion. Just the daily interest.
Yeah, it's kind of it's depressing actually, but it's a lot of money, that is for sure. Now we're fortunate; we live in a resource-rich and by most measures wealthy country, with lots of opportunity, and I love it here. But there will be challenges, and economic and otherwise for us.
That's for sure. I almost find that, especially for the Western world, I almost find that the external debt is something they're going to have to push a reset button on, because the debt is to the central banks, right? Like, so, for example, you look at the United States, and you have $34 trillion in debt. They are paying $2 billion a day in interest rates. Wow. They will never be able to get out of that debt. And who gets that money? Who gets those interest? Well, the National Reserve. But the National Reserve is not national. It's a franchise of the World Bank, right?
Yeah. No, it's a fascinating conundrum, because most of the U.S. debt is owed to the U.S. and different state, treasury bills and all those types of things. But there's no real easy way to collect it, and there's no real easy way to deal with it other than either a reset, which could be catastrophic, or printing more money to try to deal with it, which might just accentuate the problems. And it's an economic dilemma that's going to take some sorting out to do, I think.
For sure. And I love talking with you about all this, because I know you're deeply invested in the real estate market, and it's the most important market in the country. And that's what affects people. Like, I remember for me, my grandpa used to say, get your property first, because land is what will make you the difference between you being always trying to survive into thriving. And he's right. I actually have a real estate business on the side, and it's thriving because of the inflation. But at the same time, like, what's going to happen with the rest of the population, right?
Right. Yeah. One of the things that I find interesting is there's a lot of discussion about housing affordability and the ability for people to buy houses, and like we mentioned about younger generations and such. But for everyone who's looking to buy a house, there's someone looking to sell one. And the person looking to sell it is pleased that the prices have gone up, because that's their retirement nest egg, or it's their way they're going to finance their children to go to university, or whatever it is, or start their business, and those types of things. So it's a complicated issue. But your grandfather, there's a sensibility to his advice around, buy land because they're not making any more type of thing.
Yeah.
And and as the population is growing, both in Canada and globally, that's become more and more of a feature. And now we're about to see a technological boom, right? With the artificial intelligence and other things begin to creep into how we operate as a broader economy. I don't think we really know what the total impact will be for a while.
Yeah, it's incredible, but it almost feels like another storm is forming, right? Like, you have AI. So I follow it very closely. I just wrote a book called AI or Die, because that's where I am in technology. So it became popular, like it became #1 last year, because basically I expressed all that I knew this since 2010, 2011, because I know that the Moore's law is exponential. So basically what it says is that you don't see many progress in technology until it hits a critical mass where it goes up exponentially, like a hockey stick.
Yeah.
And I knew we were going to hit that critical mass in 2020. So by now, every year, you are actually exponentially triple, quadrupling the capability of AI. So some of the people that I follow, for example, Peter Diamandis, he's predicting that 80% of the workforce will be obsolete in a few years.
Yeah,
because of AI. So what's going to happen with all these people? Where are they going to get their jobs?
Yeah, it's an issue, right? And universal basic income is not necessarily the solution. Like, we can't just pay people not to work. Countries have tried that, and with usually not great results. But you're right, service industry, a lot of service industry jobs, a lot of sort of traditional work, everything from factory to transportation, all the rest of it, are going to be quite transformed by AI. And even knowledge workers, I find, to me it looks like for the knowledge workers, it's not this similar to what happened with the original work around software and technology. So in the 70s and 80s, the idea of a bookkeeper or accountant was someone with a green shield, and they had a piece of paper and all the rest of it. They didn't lose their job to Lotus or to Excel, but they lost their job to someone who did use Excel and was good at it and could go faster and produce more and those types of things. And I kind of feel the same way now. All right, I kind of think, we're still going to have accountants and lawyers and engineers, but the ones that utilize AI will be able to outperform the other ones, and will be able to contribute more and do all the rest of it. But in terms of technology and training, it is a concern, and the Western world's put a huge emphasis on non-STEM related education for a number of years, a couple generations really. There's huge value in it, but a lot of those folks are not as easily redeployed in an AI world. Now the beautiful thing about humans is we always find a way. We always figure it out.
Always find a way, for sure.
We always find a way. The cotton gin came, and we thought, oh my goodness, what are all these people going to do? They're going to revolt, and the whole Marxist type of thing. But guess what? We found a way. We started figuring out different things, and they became involved in different elements and higher return type of work. But those are types of things that the economists and business leaders have to be thinking about.
Oh, that's for sure, and it's happening faster than we think. Like even in my own work. So one of my businesses is a custom software solutions company. We build applications for other businesses, customized applications. 40% of the work that we're doing is generated by AI already.
Right.
There is a prediction that says that in 5 years, there's going to be no more programmers. You will need developers in 5 years.
Yeah, I can see that coming. I who knows, but you can see that possibility being there, and so it's going to be important for these things to evolve, and for the focus to be on the human element. The same goes for creative industries, right? Music and entertainment and different things along those lines. The role of the human is critical, is important. But AI is going to start generating amazing photos, and it already does, and it's going to start making motion pictures and songs and artwork and all the rest of it. And that's going to be a bit of a shift, more than a bit.
I'm getting amazed. Like, I see how every day it grows. I'm a man of faith, so I follow Christianity. I'm Christian, so I decided to open another channel, another venue just for faith. In doing research, I'm using all my tools, like I'm using my tools for the other podcast and for the other businesses. And I'm like, I wonder if AI knows about the Bible. So I'm asking specific things about the Bible to this thing. And it comes back with a sermon that nobody could have written it better. And then I go and I check the Bible verses. I check what it's trying to communicate, and it's 90% accurate. And I'm like, this is crazy.
Yeah. It's the type of thing that if you would have talked about not that long ago, it'd be viewed as like witchcraft or sorcery or something. Because you get, with the right prompt, the prompting's the key right now for the language models. But if the right prompts, which sounds like you're using, you're right, you get amazing things. Which if time travel backwards was possible, and you went to someone in 1980 or 1960 and said, "I'll have a machine, I'll put this in, it'll tell me the story of this story from the Bible or this story from the Torah," people will look at you like you're crazy. But it's doing it and it's generating it, and one of the challenges is the hallucinations, where if it doesn't know, it's just sort of making stuff up.
Yeah,
But even at that, AI will never be worse going forward than it is today. Like tomorrow will be better, and the day after
yeah,
that will be better. And I think that's the part that we're starting to see, like, have its impact. I remember it was around American Thanksgiving in 2022 when ChatGPT opened for the public, and the early ones were kind of, oh, okay, all right. Now it's, within weeks it became amazing, and then now they're in 4.0 and all that type of stuff, and it's interesting to see, and I think it's an exciting time for us actually. I think a lot of opportunities are going to be there, but we have to be mindful. We have to be mindful about unemployment. We have to be mindful about people who could be left behind.
yeah.
We want to include people. We want them on this journey together.
No, for sure, and figure out ways to generate employment and
Yeah.
make people have value. Because what are you solving? So this is okay. This is beautiful. Listen to this.
Mm.
The free world is based on free enterprise, which means every citizen has the right to choose whatever they want to do in life.
Right.
Now, the proportion of money that you get is based on how much you are adding value to the world. You're adding value to the community in terms of what you're choosing to do, right?
Yeah.
As for example, you're in charge of the real estate board of the biggest real estate region in Canada. Therefore, your remuneration, because you're under the free economy, is going to be a lot bigger than somebody that is just entering invoices as an accounting clerk, for example, right? So that's how the free world works. But if you introduce a technology in the middle of that, where there is an invisible hand, I call it, where fate actually decides and it rewards the people that are doing it better, faster, easier, with reputation, and it gets rid of the people that are lazy, dishonest, or don't want to do anything, or they want to take advantage of the system. Eventually, those people go bankrupt. That's why we are generating wealth since the Ten Commandments. I was watching the Ten Commandments yesterday. I was like, you shall not covet your neighbor's property. So it's implied that the free world is what God's will is. But if you actually put a technology there where you no longer need the people to add value, because there is a machine added the value and the machine knows how to think by itself, this is the dilemma we need to solve, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's well put, and then I think the dynamics are going to shift dramatically, and what we deem as valuable will begin to continue to shift.
Right.
And so the wide ranges in pay and different things like that, I think, will start to be addressed, because people will start to measure the value and and what we pay for entertainment and all those types of things. There's gonna be I think a seismic shift in I was gonna say Western culture, but frankly global culture.
In the global,
over the next decade or so, and the good news is we'll have front row seats to not just see it, but to be a part of it.
Yeah, to watch it.
Watch it. Yeah.
The only thing that I'm scared is that some elite groups want to get rid of private property, because once you get rid of private property, your freedom goes away with it, right?
Yeah, there's a variety of things that are nerve-wracking. Private property is one of them. The different restraint of trade things, election manipulation, different stuff like that. Those are things I think people worry about, where people can use technology for not good forces, and or to advantage of one group over another. And I think that's something we have to be mindful of and make sure that we are regulating and have rules in place about how we handle these types of things. I'm probably the last person to be advocating for more government, but I think there's some areas where a well-regulated free market is the best way to go.
Yeah. No, that's where we have to put rails, right? Like going back to AI, for example.
Right.
They just released an engine that you can actually, if you feed an hour of recording of your voice, this thing will actually learn your pitch tone, and you can get it to read anything, and it will look like it sounds like it's you. Like
Yeah.
it's impossible to differentiate the machine from your own voice. So imagine the fakeness that it could produce.
Oh yeah, and that's already there. The friends of my son took my voice off of from other podcasts and speeches and such, fed it through an AI to have it say other things that I would never say, but mostly as a joke. And I was like, holy cow, that is impressive, And this was 6 months ago, and and you're right. So things like fake proclamations, fake news, information, misinformation, and distortion of all these things is going to be easier and easier and easier.
Mm.
Turbocharge that with social media, where people tend to be in their own little echo chamber, so they just sort of hear from people that agree with them and don't hear from others who don't agree with them, and then that ends up sort of feeding towards a tribalism, because I think humans do tend to be tribal. And so all of a sudden you have a social element combined with economic element, and then there's going to be a lot of pressure on the sort of the overall cultural existence. I think doesn't mean the end of the world, but it means things that we have to be mindful of and be smart about.
Mm.
And if we do it right, which I think we will, but if we do it right, we'll move into an era of abundance, where we'll be able to, some of these jobs that we were talking about a little bit earlier, David, robots could do, and that work 24/7, 365 days a year type of deal, and that could free up people to do other things, more meaningful work, and help evolve different elements. And how we get there is the tricky part. God's in the details, but I think that will be the type of thing that will open up towards an era of abundance. That's a little bit further out, but I can kind of see the beginnings of that. Like you look what's going on with Boston Dynamics and with Tesla's Optimus robots. And the Optimus robot, I was watching the demo the other day, and it was folding T-shirts. And it was going slowly, but it was precise, but it was just learning how to do it. And then you start thinking, okay, in 2 years, how good will it be at it?
Yeah.
And how fast can it go? And it never tires out. It never gets sick. It never, gets mad with its coworkers or any of that type of stuff. That will add overall to the GDP of the globe, because it'll add more, essentially, physical computing power. And I think those are important elements to sort of do it. But we've got to be mindful of it. I think you raise a good point. We've got to be mindful of it. We can't just hit the switch and see what happens.
Yeah, and also so there's many things like that's why I love this podcast, by the way, because we can get to talk with super intelligent people, business leaders like you, where we can actually express our opinions, right? Because another critical thing that I see is the polarization, like you just said, that we try to become tribal, and social media is filled with lies, and people tend to express themselves in a way that they think there is no repercussion to them because they are not in front of the person, they are behind a keyboard, they can say whatever they want. And they tend to forget that our countries are based on freedom, but my freedom ends when my neighbor's freedom starts.
Right.
So, but that doesn't get respected on social media because they think they are powerful because they don't have the person in front of them. But it's like me grabbing my lawnmower and crossing over my lawn to my neighbor's lawn. No, I cannot do that because my freedom stops where my property ends.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. Sort of the keyboard warrior type part inflames these things, and even at that, like the rise of bots in social media, and you hear about these sort of bot farms that will deluge either celebrities or put forward a message about something that may be half right or just has a certain point of view, but they can deluge it with 6 or 7 million bots spitting out thousands of tweets or posts or communications or things like that. Layer on top of that the fake stuff, like you mentioned a minute ago, with voices or fake images or all the rest of it. And I kind of in the back of my mind think that the thing to help keep AI in check will be AI, and other people using AI to help counter it.
Mm.
It's similar to cybersecurity. And when companies were quite nervous when the early AI and machine learning was coming out a decade ago about what this would mean for cybersecurity. And then they began to work on the idea of using machine learning to defend these companies. And it ranged from banks to law firms to government offices, things like that. And then now the AI are taking that to another level. And I think that those types of checks and balances will end up, I think, long term prove to be quite valuable.
Yeah, it's incredible how everything is merging. Like the stuff that you and I are talking about, just imagine that we're like what, 4,000 miles away, and we're
Yeah.
talking real time, and this is being recorded, and thousands of people will watch and listen to this.
Hmm.
And we are in 2024 now, and everything is exponentiating so much. Like at the same time, though, like I feel like we haven't learned anything as humanity. Like we're still killing each other in wars in Europe.
Yeah.
Like, could you ever imagine that there will be a war in Europe? Or, I mean, Israel and all the Muslim against Jewish people, they have been fighting for thousands of years. Like
Hmm.
that's the norm. And I'm not excusing that war, which because it's horrible too. But like having a war between brothers in Russia and Ukraine, like those people are brothers, like true brothers. And so I'm like, we are about to hit an international war. Like if something happens in the Middle East, if something happens with the ships that Iran
Mm.
is sending, we have over 10 countries with ships in the Red Sea right now.
Yeah.
Like it's like a ticking bomb. And I'm like, where are we? Like we're supposed to be 2024. We're supposed to learn from our 80 to 100 million people died in the Second World War. That was only 70 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
One
you're
generation
right.
ago.
Yeah. You're right. And it is kind of like a tinder box, where if one wrong move or one thing goes kind of sideways, you can see how these things get out of control. And it's easy to look back and say, oh, how did World War I start? The assassination of a sort of a third tier aristocratic person. But the reality was it started a ripple effect, and it got out of control. And you're right, if someone sinks a ship or drives a bus into something, it could start something bad. Another element, not to be a downer, but another element that's sort of weighing in, and I think at an increasing pace, is climate change. And some parts of the world could well be uninhabitable in sooner than we think. The southern United States, areas along the equator, could turn into arid wastelands to some degree. Um, uh, Economically, it may be a boom time for Canada and Russia and places like that, have a longer growing season and lots of fresh water and those types of elements. But most wars are built around a fight for resources, either people or oil or water or whatever it is. And so there is that specter out there too. Like that's another thing we got to get our arms around.
Yeah.
It's a challenging time, but we'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. And it's one day at a time for sure, Jeff. Now tell
Yeah,
me, how do you get this amazing, beautiful, positive mindset? By the way,
yeah.
I'm a computer scientist and I see patterns. And, I will say all, like 99.9% of my guests, all of them come with a very strong positive mindset. And that's how they got where they are in life. So is it with Ola? Who was responsible for the way of your thinking?
That's a good question. I do tend to view myself as quite positive and optimistic as far as outcomes goes, and I definitely have a growth mindset. I feel like if you're not growing, you're dying. I think what kind of turbocharged it for me, to really, family was obviously super important, but an early teacher I had was a big fan of mine, and he helped encourage me to think broadly and to have a broad, almost ambitious, not in the work sense, but in the impact sense, an ambitious view of the world. And I was 12, 13 at the time, and it struck me, and so I really try to lean on it. I do agree with you. I do find that's kind of my observation as well. The very successful people tend to be optimists, and I think it's hard to live life if you're always looking for the problems and always looking that things are a disaster or very tough.
Mm.
Um, if you think there's a way through it and that we can persevere, and you're willing to put yourself into it, that's really the secret weapon. I'm a head and heart person. I think if someone's smart and willing to work hard, they can accomplish almost anything. And I see that over and over again with the people I work with and interact with throughout my career. A lot of very smart, hardworking people making huge positive impacts. But I do think the mindset's a huge part of it. I think you're quite right. And
No, for sure.
it's easy not to. It's easy to just give up and just say, "What difference? Who cares?" But if you keep doing your bit and in your little part of the world, and then you start having a ripple effect. And I really try to lean in and give. I mentor people. I work with developing companies. I try to give my time as freely and as openly as possible, because I agree with Paul McCartney. The more you give, the more you get. And yeah,
that's another biblical term, actually, right?
Yeah.
When you give freely and unconditionally, it's a spiritual law. You will actually get it back in return, as long as you live in the free world, by the way, right?
Yeah.
That's the only condition. You gotta be in the free world, the world
Yeah.
that was ordained by God,
Yeah.
You're completely right, Jeff. The way I see it is that if there was no problems in the world, there will be no free world and no companies, because a business is the one that solves a problem.
Yeah.
Right?
That's well put. Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And most companies have a life cycle, and people kind of forget that. They think it just goes on forever, but they don't. With a couple of exceptions, but there's some Japanese monastery businesses have been around for 600-700 years, but most businesses have a life cycle, and an important part is that the people are growing and evolving. On that front, a good story of contrast for me is Nintendo and Kodak, both founded in the late 19th century, 1889 for one, 1892 for the other. One became the name for their product, Kodak moments and all that type of stuff, dominated film sales, in fact, invented the digital camera. The other one, Nintendo, evolved and kept changing, doing a whole bunch of things. They started off making playing cards, and then eventually got into board games, and then got into love hotels, which are exactly what you think they are. got into an Uber before there was Uber. You would call up someone and they would come with a private car to take you to someplace. They did all these types of things before they were called Nintendo, but before they came the Nintendo that we know now, which really sort of emerged in the 60s, and then by the 70s they started getting into gaming in the traditional sense. So they kept evolving, kept changing, and thrived, and now has a market capitalization of billions of dollars. Kodak refused to change, was terrified of cannibalizing their film sales, and as a result, eventually went bankrupt. The name still exists for some pension funds and to license some of the patents that they have, but the business as we know it collapsed.
It's gone, yeah.
It's gone, yeah. And if you would have gone to 1950 Times Square and said, I'm going to tell you what happens to Nintendo and Kodak, their first thing will be, no one will ever touch Kodak, and I've never heard of Nintendo.
Yeah.
Right. And so I always like having a long-term view of it, and if you have that type of lens, you start realizing, oh cow, like this is pretty dramatic. There's a lesson to be learned from both of them.
Oh, for sure. And it's that innovation. For me, the lesson is keep innovating.
Yes.
Because the only thing that is constant in life is change. Right?
Yep.
And also don't find the inevitable, right? That's why I wrote the book AI or Die. It's for business people. Yeah. So basically my message is embrace AI right now, or die, because your competition will do it and you're going to go bankrupt because they're going to have a third of your cost.
Yeah. I agree wholeheartedly. A thing I like to talk about. And so before I was in this business, I was in the copyright industry for 20 years. So music rights and film and TV and things like that. And I think when it comes to AI and the march of technology, you either build bridges and start to work with these new technologies and these new players, or you try to build a moat and keep them out. But in my experience, eventually they find a way across the moat and the outcome is not good. But by building bridges with them, and you can partner with them, you can start to enable it and have new business models arise. And that's what happened. Like, Napster and BitTorrent eventually morphed and became not literally those companies, but eventually were replaced with legal versions of Spotify and Apple Music and YouTube and Netflix and Hulu and Disney Plus and all those types of things. And I think that type of evolution shows, I think generally bridges work better than moats. Building a moat and saying we're going to fight them off till the end of time, time is not on your side.
And
it just keeps marching on.
And it's incredible because how technology evolves. So you talked about BitTorrent, and people don't even know, like they don't know what Napster is or BitTorrent because they were not there in the 90s and early 2000s to see the evolution. But BitTorrent was responsible for the early stages of blockchain technology. That's why you were able to actually grab a music file and download it with very low internet speed because bits of the file was in many servers and many computers, many client computers. And they were using the earliest version of blockchain. That's why it's called Bitcoin. People don't know why it's Bitcoin or why it's BitTorrent because it's a bit that is spread in the chain among all the users.
Spot on. You're exactly right. Yeah. You're exactly right. It's all connected. It's all connected, right? But it's awesome. I'm excited for the future, but we're gonna have challenges, and we're gonna rise to them.
Yeah, and as long as, like you said, stay positive. For me, like people of faith, believe in your Lord, your God, as much as you can in these days, and hold on to your faith, and find ways to innovate and to take the things that happen in the environment towards your advantage. Because that's what's going to bless the world. Like, how do you create solutions to the problems that are emerging right now?
Right? Yeah. Oh, yeah. The humans are amazing. All right. We're amazing problem solvers and have done and will continue to do amazing things. And I think you're right. With that type of mindset, our potential is largely unlimited.
Jeff,
as long as we don't kill each other first.
I know. I was gonna say, as long as they don't start using, atomic bombs. That's why I'm afraid of right now for the war in Ukraine because if they ticked off Biden of Russia, they're gonna release a nuke, and if they do that, hell breaks loose on Earth, right? And they are very close to do that. They were saying what will happen if they drop a bomb in London, England, and they say the expansion of the bomb, and it's not even a big bomb, a small bomb will actually destroy the entire city, right? So anyways, let's not focus on that. Let's focus on future, right?
It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. Yeah.
Jeff, thank you so much for your time. I don't want to abuse it. I will ask you one last question before we finish the podcast.
Okay.
If you had access to a billboard in front of the busiest highway on Earth, what would you write in it?
Your life is important, and you are a beacon for someone.
That's beautiful. You are a beacon for someone, right?
Yeah. You may not realize it, but someone looks up to you, and you're that connection for them. And I think we all have important leadership roles in there, in our lives and who we interact with. And it goes from someone at the corner store to who knows, big business dealings and everything in between. But I think if I could get a message to the whole world, that'd probably be it. Because I think sometimes we forget that.
For sure. Jeff, thank you so much. If people would like to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
I'm on X as Jeff King 17, and you can find me on LinkedIn and Facebook under Jeff King.
Wonderful, Jeff. Yeah. Thank you so much. Keep blessing the world with your amazing work, and have a beautiful rest of the week.
All right, thank you, David. Thank you. Bye.
Blessings. Cheers.
Bye.
That's all for today's episode of the Break Free Podcast. Head on over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Starting your own business can be tough, but it doesn't have to be. Visit davidmansilla.com to pick up a copy of the #1 international best-selling book, Breaking Out of Corporate Jail. Expand what you consider to be possible and reach your full potential. And join us on the next episode.